join. So we'll just hit record unless anybody objects.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. We just talked about how we always forget that step, but I'll share my screen so that everyone can see the methodology document and just kind of walk through a few of the relevant sections really quick before getting into the worksheet that we sent out and answering questions about it. Just 1 second here. All right. And I'm curious, has everyone had a chance previously to review this document? It was developed through the SME team earlier last year now, and accepted by the SRTC board a few months ago. But is this new to anyone?
I would assume maybe Ben, but, not to put you on the spot, Ben, but yeah. let's walk through it pretty intentionally, David, so those that for which it is new or can become acquainted.
Yeah, I'll make sure we cover all the relevant points then. It just goes over what the methodology we're going to work and have been working through to develop this MTP Updates land use forecast. So it starts out just with a quick introduction and goes over our different land use categories. There are 12 of them. 2 are population-based, housing units for single and multifamilies, then hotels and students, commuter students, and then the remaining 8 are all employment-based categories. So let me see here. It breaks it up into the population forecast methodology and the employment forecast methodology because for a variety of reasons, we approach those a little bit differently. So the population forecast, it really consists of 4 primary steps. The first is to establish the countywide control total. Second, to determine capacity. Third, identifying recent and planned development. And then fourth, allocating population growth to the individual TASs. So the countywide control total, that's pretty straightforward. That's just based off of OFM's mid-series, since that's what the county adopted. If the county changed that, we would change that control total, but that's where it is for now. And for this update, we had to use the supplemental forecast that OFM releases because for the MTP, unlike the countywide planning policies, the horizon year is 2045. So that's where that overall countywide control total comes from. Then in determining population capacity, so this we worked through with the SME team, and what we did was we came to the decision that we would use local jurisdiction data where available. We updated it with our building permit data, and I think the city of Spokane, Spokane County, and Spokane Valley were the jurisdictions that were able to provide us that parcel level capacity data so that we could factor it in. Then in areas where we didn't have that granular level of data available, we tried to replicate that same LQA process that was used by the jurisdictions, and it's basically the same processes as described in Department of Commerce's buildable lands guidelines, and performed a really sketch level capacity analysis for the rest of the county so that we could have that to complete the data set to get an overall capacity for each individual TAS for population. So after that, the next step was to identify that planned and in-process development. We sent out the request several months ago and received it back from, I think, everyone. So that's been incorporated into this. And then the last piece is just distributing it down to the TASs. So we, with the assistance of our consultant, who's really provided a lot of help throughout this process and carried the bulk of the work in this area, they used the logistic growth curve that we went over with the SME team and agreed would be the best approach given a variety of factors, and used that to distribute population to, so LU1 and LU2, those first 2 land use categories, to all the individual TASs. So with that data, really, and as you saw in the request, we just are asking you to review it. If you see anything that you disagree with, provide us with documentation, and we can adjust that as necessary. But reviewing that without further input is being complete. And Mike, Beth, do you have your hand up? Yeah, I'm seeing a yellow circle. I'm not sure if are there any questions that anyone else has about that population section before I move on to employment? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to employment. Feel free to jump in with any questions, anyone that you may have. So for employment, that also consists of 4 primary steps, but they're a little bit different. Starts out with the control total for the county. Then we determine growth by sector, since that has those 8 different land use categories, plus hotel motel, which is kind of grouped into this employment side of things as well. We looked at those individual sectors. And then the next piece was, again, identifying planned and approved development, and then allocating it. And for employment, I'll get into this in a little more detail, but as you've seen in the worksheet, we just allocated it initially to the transportation analysis zone districts, much larger geography, and are asking you to distribute it within those districts to the individual TASs, keeping to the district level control totals that are in that worksheet. Just a couple things to really highlight in the employment side of things. First, those sector-based growth shares are derived from ESD, the Employment Security Department's long-term projections for the region. So they do those for each region in the state. So it's unique to Spokane, how they're projecting that. It extends out 10 years. We've extended that out an additional 15 years to account for our planning horizon. But that's how we distributed the growth among those different sectors, keeping to the control total. From there, to get to the transportation analysis district level, what we did was look at the individual district growth rates using the Census Bureau's LEHD data. And that data is available at block level. We talked about maybe doing it at the transportation analysis zone level, but there was some concern from, and I think reasonably so, from the SME team, that once you drill down to that small of a geography, the historical growth rates can kind of be all over the map, and it's better to initially look at a larger geography. We could have used jurisdictions, but those boundaries sometimes can be somewhat arbitrary when it comes to employment growth patterns. So we looked at those transportation analysis districts, which tend to have more similar land use patterns within their boundaries to get that initial distribution. And that's what we sent out to you in the worksheet, are the control totals for those districts for each of the employment categories, as well as hotel, motel rooms. And within that, we're asking you for your I guess, local expertise on within those districts and your jurisdictions, where's the growth likely to occur? Which transportation analysis zones do you see it happening in? And that control total at the TAS district level hopefully makes it a little easier to kind of focus in on that. So I'll stop now before getting into the worksheet, just for any questions or concerns or anything like that.
I guess one thing I would ask, maybe this is for Mike, or I don't know who the GIS guy is over there at SRTC, but if we could get like these layers, it'd be great. We can throw them into our GIS and just make it easier for us to allocate this employment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. we can provide you with that.
Yeah, I would agree. If we can get a shapefile or whatever, shapefile would be the easiest.
Yeah, we can send a shapefile that has the land use totals, and it'll be a TAS shapefile, but each TAS, the way we have it is they have the TAS district assigned as an attribute, so you can summarize that at the district level as well. And I'm thinking it probably would make the most sense, although let me know if anyone thinks there's a better way to do it. To, for each of those TASs, include the employment control totals for the TAS district, so that in the shapefile for each one. I just wouldn't want that to be confusing where anyone thought that that was the total employment growth for the actual TAS, but that's the way we used it internally, at least, is to have that TAS district level control total for each employment category assigned to each TAS. Does that make sense? Are there any questions about that?
Well, from my perspective, I mean, really just having the geography is the important piece.
Mm-hmm.
We can always reference the Excel spreadsheet for any other
Oh,
information
yeah,
that we might need.
that makes sense. And if it's helpful too, we can just provide you with the TAS district shapefiles. Would that be helpful? Or, you know, if
I
we've
think
got it.
so. I think
Okay.
maybe the districts and then the individual TAS. I think we have some of it. I just want to make sure that it's the most up to date.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, we can send you.
Hey, Mike, are you using Pro yet out there in the Valley?
Well, I'm not really using anything.
Okay.
Chaz is probably, maybe, I don't know. I've got the latest ArcGIS, but I don't get into it much anymore, Kevin.
Okay. No, I was just curious because
Well,
I was able to pull the layers down from the portal.
Oh.
They're on the public portal.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah,
sorry,
that's a good point, Kevin. I was just going to jump in and say, there in that letter that I sent out I copied everyone here on and then sent to the official at each jurisdiction. There's a map linked in that letter, and you should be able to. I mean, we could provide them to whoever needs them, no problem. But it might be easier to just pull them down from that AGOL map straight out of that map and download them right from there. Again, we're happy to provide it to whoever needs it separately, but that would just be another way to get at those geographies.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike and Kevin. So maybe if anyone wants them and isn't able to access them through AGOL, just send me an email and I'll send you a zipped shapefile or whatever format works for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So any other questions before we dive into the worksheet? Okay. Let me see here. Switch screens for a section and for a second. And I think we'll use Spokane Valley as the example here, kind of in the middle in terms of the number of TASs and things like that. So we'll walk through your worksheet just a second as I switch screens. Okay. There we go. So is that showing up for everyone, the worksheet for Spokane Valley?
Yep.
Okay.
Or for me, it is.
Yeah. Well, if it isn't for anyone, let me know. But so this first tab just gives you some general instructions. And here's the link to the TAS map. So if you select that, the map will come up. And this one is just for reference, kind of general reference for the employment side of things. So it's got the TAS boundaries and the TAD boundaries as well. And it includes those control totals at the TAD level.
We're not seeing the map, David.
For employment. Oh, I think I just shared my the worksheet, not the entire screen. Let me switch that. Okay, so now is everyone seeing the map?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, this is the one from that link. So you can see the dark blue boundaries. I'll put the legend here. Those are the district boundaries, light blues, the TAS boundaries. You can scroll in and select. So if you select a TAS, since those don't have employment control totals, it'll just give you the LU1 and LU2 totals. But if you move over to the TAS, that'll give you those control totals at the TAD level for each of our employment land use categories. that's that map. And yeah, from there you should be able to, like Kevin said, download those 2 shape files that are on that map. I guess while I'm here, I might as well show you the population map as well, which is in your letter. There's a link to this one. And this one, just the only difference really is that it's got the, it's symbolized by employment growth. So the density of growth by TAS, that's what the shades of orange and red are showing. So it's the same thing though, just the LU1 and LU2 totals. So that's just there to check what's in your jurisdiction. And again, if you see anything that you would disagree with and have documentation that you can provide us with, just let us know and we can make that adjustment based on the documentation you send us. So back to the worksheet. Here it's got the land use categories for reference down below. The ones that we need filled out are in bold. For the city of Spokane, number 9 should be in bold as well, but that only applies to the city since it's TASs 1 through 22. And then in the second tab, that's where it has the worksheet. So you'll see up top in row 4, columns C through J are the different land use types. So it's broken out by transportation analysis district. You can see the TASs inside that district that are in your jurisdictions. And then here in yellow, this is the amount of jobs or hotel rooms, depending on the category that you have remaining. Down on the bottom in the gray is the control totals for that TAD. So right now they match, but if I add 28 medical to TAS 568, it'll show 0. And sometimes this is just because the way our land use is, it actually has decimals. I've just for simplicity's sake made it so that it doesn't show the decimals, because I think we can round and that works fine, makes it easier for everyone. But there you can see it showing up red like it's a negative number because it's probably negative 0.01 or something like that. But you just add the land use as you go. So if I add 10, it'll show 18 remaining up on top. And yeah, just until you see all zeros up in the yellow row. So should be hopefully pretty straightforward. Are there any questions, or has anyone run into any issues if you've started to fill it out? No? Okay. Well, if you do have any questions, feel free to send myself or Mike or Michael Redlinger an email, and we can yeah, go over any issues that you're experiencing in it. One thing I did want to point out is that in our forecast methodology, we did specify the one that was agreed to by everyone. We specified that we'll use the market-based forecasts where they're applicable. So there are a number of TASs within the city of Spokane, Spokane County, and Airway Heights, where there's market-based growth that's actually at the TAS level for employment that was factored into the forecast. We didn't, it was an oversight on our part. We didn't send it out with this initial spreadsheet. We did finish filling that out for the city of Spokane and sent it your way, and we'll get that to the county and to the city of Airway Heights. And what we've done there is just plugged in for the TASs the market-based forecast figures. So you're just left with the remaining data. And in some cases, it changes those control totals a little bit because it's factoring in all the market-based growth that's being considered. So we'll send that out to the county and Airway Heights, and it might reduce, well, should reduce the work on your end a little bit because some of those TASs will already be filled in with that data. So you'll have less remaining growth to allocate. It's the same thing though, where review it, and if you see anything that based on documented future growth, planned growth that you have, it contradicts what's shown there, send that our way and we'll adjust it based on that documentation.
Yeah,
we ran
David,
into. Yeah,
Oh.
go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, David.
Oh.
I just wanted to add and maybe clarify a little bit that those market analyses in some cases are as much as a year and a half old. We use them because of how recent that data is. But given where we're at now, I guess I'm thinking of the Meade Mount Spokane study that's now probably 2 years old. At least that data that informed that study is now 2 years old. The point that David's making here is if you have development or proposed development that is contrary to what those original market studies were assuming, i.e. if the market-based study shows 100 hotel rooms in a particular TAS, but you have on your desk a development permit for 100 hotel rooms in a different TAZ, please forward us that information, and we can make those revisions within those market-based areas, study areas. We fully recognize that those market-based studies were a snapshot in time, and again, some of those are very recent, especially I'm thinking out on the West Plains, but some of them are less recent. So we're willing to make revisions where you have demonstrated development that is contrary to what the original market study data assumed. We're not going to be so rigid as to only stick to the market. We understand that the market can change and probably has changed in those last, in the case of Meade Mount Spokane, 2 years. In the case of West Plains, it's probably been a year. So forward us that data and we'll make those revisions accordingly. I think the key though is that we remain balanced within the districts. And maybe I'll let David, you can kind of take it from there. I just wanted to highlight that point to make sure that we're perfectly clear that if you have development permit data on your desk, we want to use that as opposed to the market data because it's obviously more recent.
Yeah, I know. Thanks for going over that. I think that's a great explanation of that particular issue. That it looks like that's already occurred with the city of Spokane. Inga and you, Kevin, from what I saw in that email this morning, found a TAS where there was a hotel permitted that wasn't shown in the, I think it was the 195 market study in that case that didn't catch that. So
and that one's the most recent. So there you go. There's a prime example where you folks, the land use authorities likely have more recent development activity that needs to be reflected that wasn't reflected in the market-based data.
Yeah, we're not only pulling current permit data, but we're looking at also our pre-applications and our design review, because things tend to come to design review before they come to anything else. And we're pulling those in, and so we'll have more adjustments than what Inga's probably already noticed.
Yeah, okay. Kevin, I think the only thing I'd add to that is just make sure when you send us those in the notes field, you can see that column K there.
Yeah.
Just indicate the difference between, because the only reason we need that information is because we want to document the manual changes that we're making, so that we can include that as an appendix to the forecast and the MTP.
Okay.
These will all, of course, be deviations from that logistic growth analysis that David described. So we just want to be able to document each of these changes so the people that come after us can say, this is why they changed it, and here's the data that supports that.
Yeah, something like, changed hotel rooms from this number to this number because of this permit or this ongoing project.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and
documentation.
Yeah, we've experienced that through this land use update quite a bit. But the only other thing I'd ask is just to include which TAS to take that from. So let us know which one to take it from as well. And like Mike said, we want to keep to those control totals within the TAS district. So if there is a TAS within that district, we'd say take it from that first, unless you know that growth is going to occur as well.
I was going to say, because we have at least one project that is large enough that it will far exceed what the whole district's already been projected for, and we'll make sure that that's real obvious why. But in that case, we have an actual permit. We know how many rooms it is. We know how tall it is. So
yeah, and I think in those cases, like Mike and I were talking about this before this meeting of what to do when that's the case, which sounds like it is. And I would say if there are, try and find nearby TAS districts that have that land use category to pull from. Use your best judgment. We're relying on your local knowledge, but I think it's just that idea that those market forecasts were in theory projecting demand, looked at it in a lot of detail. So if we're going to show that this growth is occurring elsewhere, our assumption is that it would be taking from that demand that was projected for that that general area of the region.
So consider proximity when we're
Yeah.
stealing from. Okay.
Unless there's really good reason not to, which I mean,
Yeah.
we can have a conversation, but yeah, try and consider proximity with that. So I think that just about does it as far as the worksheet goes. Just filling that out again. Airway Heights and Spokane County will send over the revised spreadsheets that have the market-based growth plugged into it, and we'll just shade those cells blue is what we did for the city so that you can see it, and we'll include an additional column with a flag so that you can filter those out and take a closer look at them as well, just for the sake of reviewing it and seeing if there's anything that that contradicts development that you know is going to occur. But yeah, I guess with that, I'll just open it up to any additional questions about this process.
So I do have a question. I'm assuming that when you send over the updated spreadsheet with TAS information filled out, you're referring to the West Plains Transportation Analysis, the Leland Market Analysis that Bonnie commissioned.
Yeah, for the city of Airway Heights, I believe that's the only one in your jurisdiction. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Mike.
No.
Well, I think, real quick, Heather, I think we're also using the analysis that was done as part of the 61012 TIV application. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you included that as well. Okay.
Yep. Is that right, David? That was included, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I think a lot of those TASs overlap. So yeah, if you see anything that it's contradictory to that study, let us know. But because I'm just thinking when I was looking, because our consultant noted which study it came from, and most of the West Plains came from that US2 Airway Heights sub-area study, but I think there were a few from another study.
Real quick, Heather, I'll just add, just so everyone knows, and it's mostly applicable to the county, Airway Heights, and the city. We actually amended our agreement with Leland, who is the consultant that helped us with this countywide forecast. We amended our agreement with them to grow those forecasts, because Heather, you'll likely recall that those forecasts only went to 2040. We amended our agreement with them and added hours so they could grow those to 2045, so they would match our horizon year. So they should be fully aligned. But like David said, if you find a discrepancy, and I know there was some temporal disparity between the US2 West Plains study and the 61012. I know 61012 is likely more recent. So if you, I guess the bottom line is, if you notice any discrepancies between either of those, in your case, either of those two market analysis and it not being accurately reflected in the data we send over in the revised sheet, just let us know.
Okay, well, I mean, just generally speaking, the objective of the two plans were not the same. So the 61012 was looking predominantly at residential and to some extent commercial development that would occur on the corridor, and was only looking at property that was immediately adjacent to it, whereas the West Plains study was looking at a larger not only study area, but was looking at total land use categories between the three jurisdictions and total consumption rates. I mean, in addition to time, the more later study is super focused on the north half of the city. So thank you for asking for them to update that and include that information. So we'll just wait until we get the updated spreadsheet to see what information that you have.
Okay.
And that makes sense if the newer study was fairly focused, why most of the growth that our consultant plugged into the forecast is from the other one. It's only covering a small area. Okay, any additional questions? Again, feel free to send myself or Mike or Michael an email if anything comes up along the way. We're happy to respond and do our best to answer any questions that come up.
David, if you could send the shapefile on the spreadsheet to me at the city of Cheney, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. And I think actually you may have been impacted a little bit by the market-based forecast too, because one of the districts stretch is so large that it stretches from the city of Cheney to the parts of the county that border Airway Heights, and they're in the West Plains area. So it might be a little revised on your end too. So we'll if necessary send.
That'd be awesome.
Mhm. Yeah, we'll do that. And you said you would like the shapefile as well for the.
Yeah, I'll bring that
ads and
into our
tags.
GIS system so we can do a little bit more analysis on it.
Okay, sounds good, Brett.
Us too, David, please. City of Spokane Valley.
Spokane Valley. Okay.
Yeah.
City of Liberty Lake would be great too. I was going to ask you in a separate email, but since we're all asking.
Yeah.
Okay, will do.
Way to go, Brett. Thanks.
Trying to save everybody some effort here.
Okay, sounds good. Send them your way. Have any questions about any of the attributes or anything, just let me know. Yeah, any other questions or requests or anything?
I guess the last thing that I want to mention is there's obviously some overlap between there's a couple of TAs, or there's a few, more than a few maybe, of TAZs that are multi-jurisdictional. And so, David, do you want to address those? I know in the case of the city, well, I'll let you handle that because I know you looked at that data a little closer when you were building these sheets. So do you want to just address that generally? And I guess my main message is we intend to coordinate the multi-jurisdictional approach to those TAZs, but practically, David, maybe you could just address that real quick.
Yeah, because we had to decide how to split how much is allocated to each jurisdiction if it has stretches across two jurisdictions. And actually, in a lot of those cases, those are market-based TAZs, ones that are in those market forecasts, because a lot of the multi-jurisdictional TAZs are out in West Plains between the city, the county, the city of Spokane, the county, and Airway Heights. So in that case, we already have that number for the TAZ. In other cases, though, we just looked at the existing population shares in that TAZ and distribute it, or not population, but employment shares by category. So if a TAZ had in our 2019 base 100 retail jobs, and it was split between the city of Spokane and the city of Spokane Valley, and it was 60-40 to the city of Spokane Valley, we would have assigned 60% of the future growth to Spokane Valley and 40% to the city of Spokane. That was our best method we came up with, since we don't have capacity data.
Is that by land area, you mean, the proportion of land area?
No, we didn't use land area. We used existing employment by employment
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Much better.
Yeah. Land area could get tricky at times when you have a really sparsely populated TAZ that has a little piece in a city. So we did not do that. But I think Mike Basinger, I thought I saw you starting to say something, but you were on mute. Is that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I appreciate what you guys have done. In the past, we really were left to distribute everything throughout the city. So you'd have an allocation, but then you're left to distribute it all. So it's kind of nice that you're able to take the data that exists and distribute it accordingly, and then we can go and look at it. Because it is somewhat of a guessing game. I mean, obviously we know projects are coming, but it's still a pretty large guessing game. So appreciate the help.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. The other thing since I was kind of joking earlier that we had a quorum of PTAC members here, but the other thing that's worth mentioning here, and we've heard this feedback, some of you guys might have sat in on our board meeting. We've heard this feedback from some of our board members who happen to also sit on the steering committee of elected officials, questioning OFM's mid-series forecast into 2045. And I know that's nothing new, right? These conversations have been happening for decades now. But, as we start to get closer to the full countywide forecast for the comprehensive plan updates that are forthcoming, I think it's worth a conversation at the PTAC level, and to Mike, to your point, to start to look at some of this newer data to understand if OFM is keeping up with the east side of the state. We went back and looked at more recent trends, and 5 years doesn't make a trend, but when we heard some of the feedback at our own board meeting, David and I went back and started to look at some of those more recent growth trends. And 23-year forecasts are tough, right? It's difficult to forecast 23 years into the future. But if you start to look at the data a little more closely, more recent data would suggest maybe there are some shifts happening. So I don't want this conversation to end with our exercise. I think it's a longer conversation, especially as we build up to the steering committee of elected officials forecasting exercise for comp plan updates. I think it's a larger conversation that SRTC is certainly willing to add all the data that we have at our disposal to. But again, I just wanted to kind of point out that this is a larger conversation that I think is worth having at the PTAC level before the steering committee even gears up for that exercise, because as more data becomes available, I think we have more resources to bring to bear to help the steering committee answer that question. And I would just encourage us all to think about that as we get closer to that exercise with the full county.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a great note to end on, Mike. Because yeah, it was interesting looking at the data. You look back at the first part of the decade, and we were growing much slower than the state as a whole. But in the last 4 or 5 years, our average growth rate is outpacing the state. Forecasts don't show that continuing, but it's, yeah, that could not be the case. We'll see. But yeah, any last questions before we wrap up?
No, just a comment. And, I think there are some trends that we're seeing. I mean, especially with people wanting to move from Portland and Seattle. So, I mean, things could change dramatically, and maybe some of our elected officials will be more on key, because in the past it was more, we just want more growth so we can expand the urban growth area. But we may need to seriously look at that. And I think we need to look at infill development too within jurisdictions, because it can be challenging. And, we've always said, well, if the pressure's there, then those parcels will develop, but it's not really happening. So I think we need to pay attention to some of those things. Not advocating that we overgrow our population or push to expand the UGA. And it's just that I think we really need to take a serious look at that. So appreciate it, Mike, and appreciate you guys bringing the data to the table.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I'll just add one final point. SRTC has committed to an early adoption to our next MTP update. I expect that will probably happen in 2023 or 2024. So we're hoping that I think, and Mike, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong here, or anyone on this call could. Are the comp plan updates due in 2025? Is that right? Yeah. So I'm hoping that there's just from a timing standpoint, there's some alignment with our next MTP update where we can again help inform that conversation and bring that data to the table. And I should say we have this sort of parallel data project that's happening too. So I think there's a lot of energy around the ability to look at that closer. We're certainly committed to that as an agency through the PTAC, and we're excited about having those conversations over the next couple of years.
Awesome. And I would say we used to get together, not because there was business at the steering committee of elected officials, but we would get the PTAC together just to talk about what's going on in the various jurisdictions. And I know it's a little more challenging right now, or maybe it's easier with Zoom, but I think it's valuable. I'm always interested in knowing what's going on within the other jurisdictions. So I think we could always leverage this group, this committee, to share with each other.
Yeah, I agree.
Right on. Well, Chaz and I will get those shape files and get to work.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
We'll send that out.
David, I was just going to add real quick, just a quick thank you, because we having been immersed in this over the last year and a half, we certainly understand the time commitment that this is. And I also fully realize that it doesn't necessarily provide a direct benefit to your day-to-day, but it does provide a massive benefit to our study efforts. So we certainly appreciate the time commitment that you guys are putting into this. And if any, as David has already said, if any questions come up along the way, please feel free to reach out and we'll address them as quickly as we can. And we're willing to sort of meet separately if we need to as well. So just stay in touch if you have questions.
Mike, did you state when you wanted this back?
Thought somebody would ask
I
that.
couldn't remember if it was in the letter or what.
Yeah, we originally said the 26th, I think, which is the Tuesday. But with that said, we got this meeting scheduled late with the holiday. Just stay in touch with us as to what your expected completion time is. We would like them as soon as possible, but if you're communicating some sort of needed extension, Brett's already reached out to us, and we certainly could accommodate an extension request, of course. We just need to be mindful of when you expect to have it to us so we can coordinate things on our end. Just stay in touch, I guess, is the message there.
Okay, definitely appreciate it. I mean, housing actions plan, shoreline master program, comp plan amendments, we're drowning over here.
Yeah,
So
I get it. Yeah.
right on.
When would we receive the updated spreadsheet with the TAS information already input into it?
Yeah, I'll try and get that out hopefully by early tomorrow. We'll have that tomorrow afternoon at the latest with the complete market-based growth added to everyone's spreadsheets.
Okay. Well, based on what we see and when we get it, I'll reach out about when we might be able to turn around a review and completing it, because I'm concerned about getting it on Thursday and getting it back to you on Tuesday.
Yeah, that's fair, Heather. In fact, in your case, I think a lot of that's going to be market-based. I want to provide you as much time as you need for a full and thorough review. So yeah, if you just want to communicate when you think is reasonable. Again, really on my end, I'm just from a project management standpoint, I'm just trying to track when we expect to have that data back. I expect we're probably going to have to reach out to some jurisdictions that we haven't heard from that aren't on this call today. So I just wanted to make sure I have all those pieces balanced and have a reasonable expectation for when we can have this done. So yeah, just stay in touch.
Awesome.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. If there's no last minute questions or anything, yeah, we'll try and get those new spreadsheets out as soon as possible, just so that you guys can get started on it. But yeah, again, feel free to reach out with any questions along the way. But thanks to everyone again for your help with this. Like Mike said, huge lift, and we appreciate all the help from all you guys.
Nice to see everybody.
Yeah, it's good seeing everybody.
Everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
That's good to see everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.